if you stop and think about it, it's actually quite amazing that there have now been not one, but 2 federal court cases holding exactly the same thing, that the Biden administration engaged in one of the most serious, one of the gravest direct frontal attacks on the free speech guarantee of the First Amendment by continuously not just pressuring or coercing, but threatening big tech companies that they must censor a wide variety of political speech that are disliked by various agencies in the Biden administration, including the FBI, the CDC, and others, including the Biden White House. Or else, the Biden administration said, for failure to censor that content, these companies will suffer all sorts of legal and retaliatory reprisals. Obviously, the executive branch has enormous control over big tech and punish them in all sorts of ways. And with regarding numerous crises, there's been all sorts of censorship that nominally was implemented by big tech, but in fact was pressured and cajoled and directed by the Biden administration. And there's all kinds of case law we've covered before, which holds that the federal government cannot indirectly censor what they would be barred constitutionally from censoring, meaning they can't threaten private actors to censor for them, and yet that's exactly what the Biden administration has done. And the court was clear, first the district court and then the 3-judge appellate court, that this is not some small or technical violation of the First Amendment. According to the court, this is one of the gravest violations, arguing the history of the judiciary, to take the internet and try and systematically censor it in this manner. And yet, there's been almost no media coverage of this. The people who claim to be the safeguards and the guardians of American democracy, who have been found to have been supporting this, have said almost nothing. Media outlets have barely covered this at all. And so just this week, the independent journalists Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, who have done great work in exposing a lot of the censorship regime, including the Twitter files, published a new joint article, investigative article, that is also bylined by Alex Gutentag at the joint Substack that they have to publish these articles. And there you see the article on the screen is from the CTIL files #1. They have a whistleblower. And the title is US and UK military contractors created a sweeping plan for global censorship in 2018, new documents show. A whistleblower makes troves of new documents available to public and racket, showing the birth of the censorship industrial complex in reaction to Brexit and Trump election in 2016. Now, this is the key point. The history of censorship is exactly this. This type of censorship really did not exist prior to 2016. It's all new. Of course, there was some big tech censorship here and there, but for the most part, the entire system and the vast bulk of what we're discussing, people being banned off the internet for their political speech, really emerged in the wake of 2016. And that's because the Western establishment suffered 2 severe blows in 2016. First, when subjects of the United Kingdom, a majority of them, voted to leave the EU by approving the Brexit referendum. And then just a few short months later, when they delivered the real traumatic blow, which was rejecting Hillary Clinton and electing Donald Trump to the Oval Office. And in the wake of those 2 events, Western elites, especially American elites, decided that the internet can no longer be free. That once the internet is free, people are free to make up their own minds and no longer under the control of Western elite. And that's when they began to implement this systemic censorship regime as a way of getting people under control, to control the flow of information that they can receive, which in turn allows them to control behavior. That is why I spend so much time on this issue, why it's such a central cause of mine. If you can dictate what populations can and can't hear, that is a level of control and authoritarianism that makes elections irrelevant. Because if people are going and voting for who they're told to vote for because they've only been allowed to hear the information that power centers want them to hear, which is what the system is designed to do, the elections are basically illusory. That's why the First Amendment of the Constitution guaranteed free speech. It really, in so many ways, is one of the rights on which all the others depend. And here's what they write, quote, "A whistleblower has come forward with an explosive new trove of documents rivaling or exceeding the Twitter files and Facebook files in scale and importance. They described the activities of a, quote, anti-disinformation group called the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, or CTIL, that officially began as the volunteer project of data scientists and defense and intelligence veterans, but whose tactics over time appear to have been absorbed into multiple official projects, including those of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, remember, the whole emergence of the disinformation industry, the people who are disinformation experts who decree what is disinformation and what is not, to allow big tech to censor, to allow governments to justify or demand that censorship, quickly emerged overnight. There is no expertise called a disinformation expert that is a concocted and made up field of discipline. And it emerged in order to justify the censorship regime, to make it seem like it was the byproduct of data analysis, rather than what it is, which is suppression of political speech based on ideology. Quote, lock your shit down, explains one document about creating, quote, your spy disguise. Another explains that while such activities overseas are, quote, typically done by the CIA and NSA and the Department of Defense, censorship efforts against Americans have to be done using private partners because the government doesn't have the, quote, legal authority. The whistleblower alleges that a leader of the CTI League, a former British intelligence analyst, was, quote, in the room at the Obama White House in 2017 when she received the instructions to create a counter-disinformation project to stop a repeat of 2016. Now a larger trove of new documents, including strategy documents, training videos, presentations, and internal messages, reveal that in 2019, US and UK military and intelligence contractors led by a former UK defense researcher named Sarah Jane S.J. Terp developed this sweeping censorship framework. Those contractors co-led CTIL, which partnered with CISA in the spring of 2020, that is, the department inside the Department of Homeland Security. CTIL's ultimate goal, said the whistleblower, quote, was to become part of the federal government. In our weekly meetings, they made it clear they were building these organizations within the federal government, and if you built the first iteration, we could secure a job for you. Terp's plan, which she shared in presentations to information security and cybersecurity groups in 2019, was to create, quote, misinfosec communities that would include government. This is the creation of the disinformation industry right before your eyes, which in turn is intended to provide a justification, a cover, a pretext for how big tech censors political speech at the dictates of the government, not by claiming that it is suppressing ideological dissent, but instead disinformation. Who wants false claims being circulated? The problem, of course, is that the people who are in control of determining what is true and false are the government officials themselves. That's in whose hands this censorship regime resides. You know, obviously I've been accused many times over the years of having switched sides or moved to the right. And I'm listening to this, and it describes in detail how the U.S. security state in the Five Eyes countries, which was the subject of the Snowden reporting, the U.S., the U.K., Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, that's the Five Eyes Alliance, the spying alliance, are working with outside contractors, military contractors, to create systems to explicitly with the goal of controlling speech on the internet. And the only people who care in the slightest about this in the Congress, the only people who are willing to object to it, are conservatives like Congressman Bishop. While every single time this arises, this topic, Democrats don't just ignore it, they affirmatively defend it. And so, yes, I'm a defender of free speech. I'm opposed to the U.S. security state censorship of the internet in conjunction with large corporations and neoliberal billionaire-funded disinformation agents. How did this become a right-wing principle? How did this become a right-wing cause? Why is Matt Taibbi on the right? Because he's reporting on the efforts of Western military agencies and law enforcement agencies and security state agencies to control speech on the internet. The last time they were there, it was extraordinary to watch as every single Democrat, every last one of them on this committee, including AOC and Dan Goldman and that non-voting delegate who pretends she's a congresswoman, Stacey Plaskett, every last one of them Colin Allred affirmatively defended the right of the CIA and Homeland Security and the FBI to determine what content should and shouldn't be on the internet. This is what left liberals do in the Congress.